your name? Don't you play this game? You from another land, got you like it's contraband. Tell me what's your name? Don't you play this game? You from another land, got you like it's contraband.
What's up, guys? Keyshawn Ochia here, back at you with another new alternate universe video. Now, this is going to be a special one. This might be an hour long because I really going to take my time with this video, but also this is going to be quite a special one. This is going to be a one that I like very much, and I'm going to pick as a favorite. And I might do a lot of parts on this, all the way up to Friday. But this will be part one of what if Deku was transported or ended up in the Dead by Daylight universe. Now, what do I mean about that? And what do I mean about Dead by Daylight? Now, Dead by Daylight, if anyone doesn't know, is a video game based on survivors and killers. You have the killers that hunt down the survivors and make sure they're supposed to all be dead, while you got the survivors that repair generators, use many perks, stuff, and use many tricky things to stun the killer and pretty much distract the killer to finish the generators and get out. While the killers have perks too to use on survivors to pretty much absolutely make their day agonizing or just worse. And that's for the same for survivors. But anywho, let's get this started. So how would this happen? We'll pretty much start off with Deku. Now Deku pretty much is, we're just gonna start him after. Well, we're just gonna start him with birth. Now I'm gonna give Deku all for one. I mean, not all for one. Yeah, all for one. I'm going to give him that, but I also want to explain the rules why I'm going to give him that. Now, A, I'm going to give him all for one for a certain reason. B, I want to give him all for one because I'm going to, you could say, alter the quirk. Now, the quirk can pretty much take other people's quirks, you could say, but I'm going to add a little bit more extra. It doesn't need to take, I'm going to add that it can take perks or abilities from people. So instead of give the Dead by Daylight class, people and survivors and killers quirks, I'm just going to give them abilities. I'm going to keep them at the same as having abilities, but I'm going to have Deku have the ability to take other people's abilities or to have it as his own to add to his ensemble. So he would just have a collection of many abilities, and also he can merge them and match them together and stuff. So that's going to make that work. And also another thing is for Deku to get the ability, A, he has to touch them, or B, he has to just see what their ability does. So that goes for killers and survivors. So yeah. Other than that, let's get started. So we pretty much start off with Deku birth. Now pretty much everything goes as the same. Just the father's going to be all for one, which pretty much all for one doesn't know that he has a son. Yet. Now, this is where Deku grows older, but this is where he doesn't know that he has a quirk, and he's pretty much a late bloomer. I'm going to make him into a late bloomer at this point. Now, Deku pretty much being as a late bloomer doesn't know that he has a quirk. The doctor says that they don't even know if he has a quirk or not. They say he doesn't have a quirk, but they also don't know if he has a quirk. So they're just confused. But pretty much, this is where Deku is continuing his life and stuff. He will still get bullied by Bakugo and stuff, and all that. Now, this is where we just skip on, and we're going to get all the way to the part where everybody wants to become heroes, and Deku gets his book burned, and he's pretty much going home to take the shortcut at the bridge. Now, as he's taking the shortcut as the bridge, this is where the sludge villain pretty much attacks Deku. This is where Deku can't really do anything, but he pretty much figure out some way and somehow slippery get out of the sludge villain grasp, which he doesn't know how. But this is where the sludge villain is saying where you think you're going and pretty much chase after Deku. This is where Deku is pretty much running at the end of the bridge, but there's a frog pretty much showing in, which Deku doesn't know what the hell this frog comes from, but he pretty much runs through it to escape the sludge villain. Now, as he runs through it, he pretty much looks around and he ends up in a camp, which he doesn't know how he got up to that camp, but he sees other people who's at the camp. And the first person he will meet at the camp is Kate. Now, pretty much Kate looks at Deku and she pretty much says, "Oh, howdy there," which pretty much Deku is confused and saying, where am I?" Which Kate pretty much explains that he's at pretty much this place. She doesn't know herself too, but she says that this is the only safe place that she knows, that they're all safe. Which pretty much Deku says someone else. Which this is where Kate explains that there's other survivors, and pretty much the other survivors comes out. Bill, Jake, Caroline, Meg, David, Adam, Nia, Fang, Dwayne, Flex. I can't even say the woman other name, right? Zeria, or begins with Euro. Jane, Claudette, Nancy, and pretty much so forth, of all the survivors, including new ones too. This is where they all meet up, and pretty much they meet up with Deku, and they all introduce themselves. And since they say the situation of how they got here, and they can't get out this place, this is where Deku pretty much explains to him that he has to get home, has to tell his mom what happened, and pretty much he has to let his mom know that he's okay and stuff. Which pretty much they said that's no way he can't really do that, because you can't really get out of this place. Which Deku doesn't know, well, understands what they're talking about, but also is, well, saddened, you could say. It begins to start being sad. This is where Deku says that he has to get home, which they say they're sorry for him, but there's nothing he can do. All he has to do now is just survive here. Which Deku says survive. Which pretty much, this is where Bill says that pretty much there will be a killer or some other monster that will come, but he basically called them killers, and pretty much said they will come out and chase after him, and most likely put him on a hook and feed him to the entity or this monster. Which Bill says it's an entity, but other people say it's a monster. Which they're fighting, but also just calming down and pretty much telling Deku what he needs to do. This is where Bill tells Deku to stick with him, and he will teach him the ropes, and hopefully they will try to figure out a way to get out this hellhole. Which, this is where Bill says they only been here for about a year, which some of them says that they've been here for a couple months, which Deku says, well, he only just got here. I am so sorry about that, guys. Had to get the stuff done, but let's continue. Pretty much, yeah, Bill basically said he would teach him the ropes, how to get stuff done, and how to survive so he doesn't die and have to pretty much end up in the camp or into the entity it grabs. Pretty much he just tells him that he doesn't want him to die and try to help him out. Which pretty much, yeah, pretty much Deku listens, and he's not like that much of a pussy, but he pretty much understands and says yeah. Now this is where pretty much Deku starts heading with Bill, because the killer was coming out this frog, which the survivors runs to, we'll just say a random map. Now pretty much this is where Deku and then runs out the frog, and they end up in the snowy map. Which Deku is pretty much saying, how is this possible? They was pretty much just at a dark place where it wasn't even snow. Which Bill says this place is weird. Which they don't know how this is possible, and they continue to just show Deku how to get the stuff done. Now as that's happening, this is where pretty much Deku taps pretty much Bill by the side of his shoulder. And this is where Deku gets Bill abilities without even knowing. Which Bill knows he has abilities, and he uses them wisely, because I'm just going to say the same happens to, the abilities will be the same as Dead by Daylight, but Deku, when he touches the abilities, he can just keep using them over and over again without any repercussions or anything. So yeah, Deku's going to be a little bit broken in this. But this is where Deku touches Bill, and Bill pretty much says, yeah, kid. Which pretty much, or let me get in my old man voice. He says, yeah, kid. Which, sorry. But pretty much this is where Deku talks to pretty much Bill and saying that where's the generator, which pretty much Bill shows him how to do the generator and how to fix it and stuff to get out of there. Now, this is where Bill says that they have to get 5 generators done. Or was it 4? I think 4 or 5. I forgot. Well, let's just say 4 just to shorten it out. But pretty much Bill says they got to get 4 generators done to get out of there. Now, as Bill pretty much is talking to Deku, well, pretty much talking to Deku, he pretty much shows him how to do it. And this is where one of the killers is chasing after one of the survivors. And I'm just going to say this is one of the legions. I'm just going to say the female one. And the legion is using frenzy, which Deku looks and he sees what the killer is doing and chasing after her and pretty much cutting her one by one and slowing her down, but not, making her fall to the ground yet. This is where Deku is saying, oh my god, which pretty much Bill tells the kid to snap out of it and pretty much continue finish the generator because you can't really do nothing to this killer unless you have some type of weapon, which we don't have weapons. We only have things to blind them or pretty much just to hold them down with the plate, with the crates. With the pallets, which there's no pallets around and you can't really carry a pallet, so we're going to have to get out of here. And, well, basically he says we have to repair the generator and get out of here. Which, this is where Deku understands and pretty much starts helping Bill out, repair the generator with Dwight. Pretty much the nerd guy with glasses. Now, as that's happening, Dwight pretty much grabs Deku and tells him that to go with Bill to repair the other generator while he goes and try to get Fang off the hook. Which pretty much Deku agrees and goes with Bill to finish another generator. Now, as Deku's going to finish another generator, this is where the Legion is chasing after another survivor. And pretty much he's making that survivor scream out loud, which pretty much I'm just going to add another survivor. Because regularly there's supposed to be 4 survivors, but we're going to add a 5th one just to make it spicy. Now this is where David is pretty much screaming because the Legion is cutting him up. Well, pretty much stabbing him. And pretty much chasing after him still. Which Bill is pretty much telling Deku to focus, while Deku is pretty much being a little bit distraction of hearing the scream and terrified, but he pulls himself together and starts helping Bill fix up the generator. Now, as Bill telling Deku, we gotta get this done quick, this is where Bill sees the generator going much faster. And this is where he realized that this is Dwight power. His power. Or his ability, you could say. Or perk. We're just gonna say perk. Fuck it. We're just gonna say ability, you could say. Now, this is where as Deku's working the generator, he realized that he's faster at the generator and pretty much he's doing much better. This is where Bill is saying, hey kid, do you have the same ability as Dwight? Which pretty much Deku was confused the same ability, which pretty much he explains what ability is. And each survivor has their own perks or abilities or their own quirks that they have. Which pretty much, this is where Deku doesn't know what his ability is. But he pretty much is just going to think about it later. And Deku pretty much says, let's hurry up and finish this generator so other survivors don't have to suffer or so they can all get out. Which this is where, as that's happening, the generators get repaired much faster and stuff. And this is where the Legion immediately realizes who she has to take out now. And she pretty much aims her targets at Deku. This is as Deku pretty much is getting chased after her. And pretty much Deku starts running away from her. But he realized that he's not fast enough to outrun her. This is where he pretty much starts using the killer's ability. And starts using frenzy. This is where the Legion is pretty much confused and wondering how the hell is this kid using the same ability as her. And pretty much she tried to outrun Deku and try to catch him, while Deku is just outrunning her with her own ability and using frenzy. Deku doesn't know how he's doing it, but he's pretty much using it and hopping through fence much quicker and pretty much just hiding pretty much just dodging the killer. This is where the Legion lose track of him and doesn't know where the hell he went at. Now, as that's happening, this is where Bill and all the other survivors, pretty much Bill, finish up the generators and begins to start leaving. This is where Bill says, no, we can't leave Deku behind, which this is where the one says, don't worry, he'd be fine. If he dies, he would end up back at the camp, which we'll see him, which Bill says, I don't want this kid to get traumatized, but this is where the White says, come on, let's just go, which Bill says, damn it, and says, kid, you better come out alive. And this is where the entity things start crumbling apart, and Deku realizes that it's happening. Now, as that's happening, this is where the Legion is pretty much looking around for Deku, and she's pretty much saying, come out, green boy, where are you? Which she's pretty much saying, calling him by his hair color, green, which pretty much she's looking for him. This is where Deku's pretty much quiet and stuff, and this is where he activates another ability, and this is where it's left behind. Now, this is where Deku feels the power, which I tell you what's the ability, what it does. Left behind. Basically, you will get the job done no matter the cost. When you are the last survivor remaining, in the trial error, or of the hatch is revealed. So basically, when you're left behind, you basically will see the hatch. He basically left behind and let you see the hatch, which Deku is pretty much looking around and stuff, and he sees a hatch, and it's maxed out, so he sees it in a far meter. This is where Deku starts sneaking around until he actually falls to the ground, which I'm just going to add that. This is where the killer, pretty much Legion, she finds out where's Deku and begins to start chasing after him. This is where Deku starts running immediately and pretty much is running to the hatch. As Deku's running to the hatch, this is where he immediately jumps in and pretty much escapes the Legion. This is where she gets pissed and says, damn it, I will kill him next time. Which pretty much she begins to start just going through the frog and just leaving and going to her place with the other killers. Now, as that's happening, this is where Deku pretty much falls through the hatch and pretty much falls to the ground saying, ow. As he's getting up, this is where he looks to the camp, and everybody looks at him with shock and surprise. This is where pretty much Kate runs up to Deku and says, oh my god, I can't believe you made it and survive. Regularly, new survivors don't survive. Which pretty much Deku is saying, yeah, I'm surprised too. Which pretty much Bill is pretty much curious about Deku and how can he copy other people's abilities, including his. Because there was no way he could find the hatch. Half the times he finds the hatch. He can only find the hatch if he's left behind, when he has to do. Which this is where Bill asks Deku the question and asks, what is he? And how can he use survivor abilities and killer abilities at the same time? Which Deku doesn't know how. But he knows that he's going to try his best to get everybody alive and get them out this, place. Which Bill says, don't kid yourself, kid. Which Deku pretty much clenches his fist and says, no, he's going to try and find a way to get them all out, if they like it or not, but he's going to try to get them out no matter the cost. Which this is where they all agree and pretty much put their faith in Deku to try to get them out. Now, after pretty much that, this is where they're all sitting at a camp, and pretty much Deku get to know more about the cast of survivors. This is where they explain the ordeal and situations of how they got here and stuff. And pretty much Bill starts saying that he's from a place where zombies is there, and basically him and his team was crossing a bridge and stuff, but they had to do something to lift something up. This is where he said he had to stay behind and pretty much be a distraction, and had to die off. Well, pretty much he thought he died off until he ended up here, which he doesn't know how, but he pretty much got out, which you could say. Now, this is where Adam pretty much is talking about himself and explaining his ordeal, and so forth. This is where Deku gets to meet everybody and pretty much understand how they feel and pretty much understand their struggle and stuff. But this is where Deku This is where all the survivors is going to sleep because they get a good sleep. We're just going to let it for this special part. And this is where Deku starts being curious and start heading to the frog while everybody's asleep. Now, as he start heading to the frog, this is where he starts looking around and stuff, and he ends up into another place. This is where he ends up in a shack. And he pretty much goes down. Well, he pretty much goes to a place where it's kind of like a broken church. A little bit of a broken church, you could say, that has a broken cross. This is where he goes in and he starts looking around, and this is where he pretty much just takes a seat and starts thinking about the situation of how he's going to get them all out of here and pretty much stop the killers from pretty much try to hurt them. And this is where he hears a bunch of voices. Now, this is where we don't say the killers do talk. So this is where the killers start coming in and start talking to each other, which the witch is pretty much saying that, what? You saying that a kid copied your ability? Huh. That's pretty crazy. How can a kid do that? Which pretty much, this is where the trapper is not speaking, but this is where he speaks a little and says, huh. So you're saying a kid. Which the legions are saying, what? You think she's saying it? You think does she have to repeat herself? When she said there's a kid who copied her ability, there's a kid who copied her ability. Or our ability. Which pretty much, this is where the clown is coughing up and saying, if you're saying there's a kid who can copy abilities and stuff, I wonder if he can copy my ability. I want to see what's my illusions and stuff. Which he's pretty much laughing about. This is where the ghost entity, she's pretty much is, saying out screams and stuff, saying, huh, and stuff. Which, this is where the Oni is saying something to it and saying, huh, you think he can copy your ability too, daughter? Well, granddaughter, pretty much, you could say. Which, the Oni is thinking about it too, is saying, I wonder if he can copy mine's. It would be strange of seeing a kid carry a weapon and smack me down by it. Which all the killers are excited that something is new is happening, and pretty much is saying that something is different finally is happening. Which, this is where Deku begins to see all the killers and stuff. This is where Mason, if I'm correct, pretty much is looking, pretty much sensing, well, no, this is where the Legion is pretty much sensing that someone's in the locker and says, wait, there's a survivor here. How can that be? Which pretty much Deku realized that he's been had and begins to run out and starts running. This is where the Legion is saying, Dora, we got him. Which pretty much the survivors are still in shock and saying, how the hell? Which the gunslinger, he's pretty much saying, Dora, I got him. And pretty much starts aiming at Deku. This is where Deku gets shot at, and pretty much the hook passes him and he says, damn, I missed. Which Deku keeps running. And he pretty much runs back into the frog, which all the killers are saying, how can he be over here? Only us killers can be over here. Which the hunter is saying, don't worry, I will hunt him down when it's time. Which pretty much all the killers are saying, now this is even more exciting. I can't wait to get this kid. Which they're all motivated to get Deku now, including Freddy. Even when Freddy's saying, interesting. Now, this is where Deku runs back, and he pretty much make it back to the camp, pretty much saying he's back, and he falls down exhausted. This is where, well, not exhausted. He's saying why he's not exhausted, but he pretty much just be fine and gets back up and starts heading back to his camp, walking more closer. This is where the survivor is saying, Deku, where did you go? Who was looking for you? Which pretty much this is where Adam asks Deku the question, where did he go? Which Deku explained, pretty much be honest with them, and pretty much starts explaining that he pretty much made it into another place where he saw the killers, well, the killers they was talking about, which pretty much this is where all the survivors are talking, saying, how did you find them, and how do you know where they're at, which pretty much he explains to all there that they're talking about him, and that he can copy abilities and stuff, and he doesn't know how. Which this is where the survivors start saying, we have to keep Deku alive at all costs. If he starts dying, he will be more bound here. Which pretty much, this is where they all agree and to help Deku, while Deku trying to figure out how he can get them all out of here. Now, this is where we switch to the entity. And the entity, and I'm just going to say the old man too, is pretty much the old man pretty much looking to the hourglass and saying, "Ah, this kid, Deku, he's extraordinary. I wonder if he can get me out of here." As he's thinking inside his head, not letting the entity know what he's talking about, because the entity is trying to figure out who the hell is Deku too, which the entity is trying to now get Deku out, which is pretty much hard. So now the entity's going to try to do his best to try to get Deku out or do something about it. But let's continue. Now, as that's happening, this is where Deku is pretty much talking to Adam, and Adam pretty much talks to Deku and pretty much tells him that let's see what abilities can you copy and what can you do. Which pretty much this is where Adam does his diversion and pretty much throws a pebble to pretty much tells Deku what a diversion 2 pretty much shows alert a killer where a certain location at, which no one's not there, but the killer will still go for it. Which this is where Deku does it, and Adam is impressed and saying, okay, what else you can do? Which pretty much, this is where he does deliverance and pretty much tells him what other abilities he can do, just in case if he gets hooked, he can get out of it. Which Deku doesn't need to unhook people. So this is where Deku doesn't know about that, but Adam tells him that Deku can pretty much unhook himself when he unhooks another survivor, which Deku says okay, and pretty much Adam explains the last thing, and pretty much talks about what it can do and stuff, and pretty much helps him out with med kits and stuff, and also helps him out do healing much quicker and all that, which it's the afterlife basically the token thing. Now, as that's happening, this is where Deku is understanding and stuff, and pretty much begins to understand a lot more survivors' abilities and stuff, and starts saying he will use them wisely and pretty much help him get out. Now, this is where a killer is coming out the frog, which all the survivors begin to start running throughout the fog and ends up into another map. Now, this is where pretty much the trapper is out, and he's pretty much saying, let's see what this kid got. As he's saying that in his head and starts walking and getting his trap and sending him around. Now, this is where Fang pretty much has her alert, and pretty much she senses, and I'm just going to give her a little bit of an extra something alert where a trapper put down a trap, and she would notice where the killer's at. This is where, as she has her alert activated, she pretty much sees the trapper putting down traps, and she pretty much alert everybody that it's a trapper, which King pretty much has his perk small game, so he can pretty much sense traps, so he will alert the team where traps are certain at, and they pretty much begin to start heading out and doing the generators. Now, as they're doing the generators, this is where Deku copies Fang's ability and pretty much begins to start using Technician, pretty much calling the repairing of the generator, and pretty much Deku he can pretty much have everybody else have the ability to, so pretty much as he's doing it, everybody else can do it. And this is where, as he's repairing the thing, this is where people were saying, oh, well, this is where the trapper is looking for everybody and saying, why the hell I can't hear them? And this is where he hears one generator gets repaired. But this is where he has sense, so he can sense where the survivor at and starts chasing after them. This is where Adam starts running, and he accidentally falls for a trap, which pretty much he gets trapped by it, and he gets hit, or gets picked up and get hooked. While Adam is screaming, this is where the trapper hits him and tells him to shut up, while he goes and pretty much saying he's going to go find the kid. Now, as he's going to find the kid, this is where pretty much Deku has alert and pretty much knows where's Adam at and begins to start running to him. This is where Deku pretty much, as he's going, he pretty much gets hit by a trap. And he pretty much about to scream until he realized that it doesn't hurt. And this is where he pretty much undoes the trap and pretty much says, what the? And this is where he picks up the trap and says, can survivors regularly pick up traps? I didn't know that. Which pretty much he has a plan, and he starts setting traps everywhere. Starts undoing the traps and putting them out at certain directions, where he can pretty much trap the trapper, you could say. Now, as that's happening, this is where Deku runs and picks up Adam, and Adam tells Deku it was a trap and run, which the trapper begins to start swinging, which Deku dodges it. Now, as Deku dodges it, this is where Adam starts running away to the corner to try to get healed by someone, while Deku starts running. This is where Deku used lethal and pretty much Volt dash something and starts getting a running speed, while the trapper, he's still catching up with Deku. This is where Deku pretty much knows where the traps he put at and begins to start running around the traps and stuff, running past the traps and stuff at certain places. This is where the trapper begins to start running and saying that, look like he's gonna fall for a trap, I said. But just as he's going to Deku, this is where he actually falls for Deku trap. And the trapper begins to say, and he feels the pain of the trap. I'm saying, what the? Now, this is where the trapper is trying to get the trap off of him, and he's messing up on it and saying, what the hell? Ain't this my trap? Which he's confused and saying, could that kid have? No, couldn't have. Maybe I just left the trap here. Which pretty much, this is where he gets out the trap and begins to start going after Deku again. But Deku has, like I said, got a lot of traps. And he been getting traps out the locker too, and been sending them down. So as Deku's pretty much going to different places where the trapper knows where he's at, this is where he's falling for the traps and pretty much is saying, okay, clearly this kid copied my ability. Which the trapper is trying to figure out how to pretty much dodge his own traps that Deku replaced down for him. As that's happening, this is where generators are getting repaired and stuff. And Fang pretty much is pretty much telling Bill that telling Dwayne, based on the nerd with glasses, that Deku is distracting the killer and pretty much having him on his feet right now and being cautious of traps. As that's happening, this is where King, I'm just gonna say King, is pretty much no, sorry, not King. Nia pretty much is looking at Deku, and Deku pretty much goes on top of the cliff and begins to start looking at Nia. This is where Nia looks at Deku and does a wave, which Deku waves back, and this is where the trapper is right behind Deku. This is where Deku jumps down, and Nia realizes that Deku doesn't have balance landed, begins to warn Deku that he will be slowed, which the trapper can get him. This is where Deku pretty much falls and starts running real fast, which Nia realized that Deku has balance landed, which she's also impressed, but also kind of mad that Deku copied her ability. Well, perk, you could say. Now, as that's happening, this is where Deku begins to start running again, and he pretty much sees the last generator, and he starts working on it, while the trapper is being careful of the traps and trying to get to Deku. Now, as that's happening, this is where Deku gets help by Dwight and Nia, and pretty much they get finished on the generator, and they start heading out. Now, this is where the trapper fails at his job and pretty much missed all the survivors because he was too busy trying to kill Deku. Now, as that's happened, this is where the entity finally figure out how to get Deku out of here, but he has to open up a gateway, which only Deku will get sucked in, and pretty much all the other survivors won't get sucked in. As that's about to happen, this is where Deku is at the camp, and all the survivors pretty much thank you Deku, pretty much telling him that they're thankful that he's here, and pretty much they haven't died for this long, and they can finally relax and stuff. Now, as that's happening, this is where all the killers comes out the fog, which they're about to run it until the killers are suckering them. And these are all the killers that Deku have already beat and outdid. Which this is where the Wraith is pretty much saying, we're about to end you. Which pretty much this is the entity biggest trap. He's basically trapping all the survivors, so only Deku can get sucked up while the survivors get massacred by having this gift. Now, as the black hole is opening to send Deku back to this place, this is where Deku's about getting sucked up, and Deku, like I said, already got all the killer's abilities, including Pyramid Head, and all the survivors' abilities. So this is where he's getting sucked up and pretty much about to get kicked out the world. As that's happening, this is where Deku pretty much is saying, I don't want to die, which pretty much this is where Dwight holds on to Deku, saying, hold on, we got you, which Dwight's about to get sucked up, and pretty much everybody holds on to Deku, all the survivors. And this is where the trickster is pretty much saying, we can't let them escape, and begins start throwing weapons at them, which he missed half of them, but hits one of the survivors, which Maggie hits, but she continues to hold on to Deku for dear life, so Deku won't disappear, so they can all escape. This is where the entity is about to close the thing, but since the entity, I'm just gonna say that since the entity used too much power to trying to suck up Deku, all the survivors get sucked up and pretty much get out the hole and gets out of the place, while all the killers are pretty much there. This is while all the killers are getting mad and saying where did they go, and pretty much they're all getting pissed off about it, including the clown, and saying, now, as that's happening, this is where pretty much Deku and all of them hits the ground and pretty much saying ow, which this is where Deku realized that he's back home. Now, as he's back home, he's pretty much looking around and pretty much sees that it's something different, and he looks to the tunnel. Well, looks to the tunnel and pretty much sees that it's light, and all the survivors begins to get up and start running, and they see daylight. But as they see daylight, Deku always sees around that something's a little bit different, and begins to start walking around and trying to figure out what date it is and stuff. And it pretty much says a new year. Well, no, it says that it's pretty much been 2 weeks, so he doesn't miss the entrance exam. So it's pretty much 2 weeks. As it's 2 weeks, pretty much Deku says, "Holy crap! It's 2 weeks," which pretty much he's shocked, and all the survivors are saying, 2 weeks? What year is this? Which they pretty much look and they realize that they're in a different place, and they're also in a different year. Well, different time period, and stuff. And well, they begin to all be sad, but they're also grateful to Deku that they got out, and they begin to start thanking Deku, even though they don't know where they at. Which Deku explains that they're in Japan, which this is where Feng and Ying pretty much they say what Japan, which pretty much Deku explains that in this place people have quirks, some people don't have quirks, and it's heroes and villains and stuff, in which all the survivors are pretty much shocked, but they're also just saying okay. And this is where Deku says that if they have nowhere to go, they can come to his house just for a bit, and they can pretty much start heading out on their own, which they all agree and start heading to Deku's house. As Deku knocks on the door, and Inko pretty much says, "Who is it?" Which Deku says, "It's me, Mom," which pretty much this is where Inko opens up the door, and she begins to start crying. And Inko, she lost a weight, because I'm going to say she haven't ate for like 2 weeks, so she lost like a lot of weight. And she begins to start running to Deku and saying, "Deku, where have you been? You've been gone for 2 weeks. I called the police, but the police don't know where you was at. Where were you?" Which Deku says he explains everything, and begins to start sitting down with the mom, while his mom is making food for the whole guest that's in the house. This is where some of them are sitting on the floor and stuff, and Deku explains what happened, and pretty much there was killers and stuff in this place, which pretty much Inko is saying, "For real?" And she's pretty much shocked and started crying that she might have never saw him again if it wasn't thanks to them, which they're pretty much saying it's no problem. But this is where they all begin to start getting up, and they start saying that they're pretty much going to start going and pretty much trying to find some place to stay, and start going to their original places at where they was supposed to be at. Which this is where she says okay, but if y'all need a place to stay tonight, y'all can stay here. Which they say okay, and they start staying there for the night. Now the next morning, this is where Deku is pretty much getting ready, and he says he's gonna still go to the entrance exam, even if he haven't got training and stuff, but he knows he's gonna pass with these abilities that he got, which Deku still has them, and also have the killer abilities, so it's gonna work for him. And he started heading to the entrance exam. As he's going to there, we're gonna switch to the survivors. Now this is where the survivors are pretty much getting dressed and stuff, and pretty much telling Inko thank you, and they start getting up and start going. Now as they're all going, this is where they're all leaving, and pretty much all of them is going in their separate ways. Some of them is sticking together, like two people sticking together. Some is sticking in a great group, saying that they're going to see the world, see what they missed, and pretty much go eat some food and stuff, some good food. While half of them is saying, all right, they're going to stay here, and make a living here. So, yeah, so far so far. So the survivors pretty much got out, and the killers are pretty much stuck in the entity world. Now let's switch to the entity world. Now the entity is pretty much pissed and outraged, and the entity wants all the survivors back, but it knows it can't get the survivors because once it does a gateway portal, it has to wait another millennium. It has to pretty much wait for 1,000 years because it takes a lot of years to grab survivors, and he basically used all his power. So it's gonna take him like 1,000 years to get all of them back, and basically all that. So it's gonna take 1,000 years to get them, and also to get new people too. So the entity is pissed off in theories and pretty much breaking the world into screaming, while the killers are just saying, "Ah, that damn entity," which they're pretty much talking to each other. This is where the huntress is pretty much flinging her axe up and down, and pretty much grabbing it at the right angle and saying, "Huh, that kid. I wonder what's the kid doing now." Which pretty much this is where the entity begins to use a little bit of its power and pretty much grabs one of the killers. And we're just going to say it grabs the spirit. Now, as it grabs the spirit, this is where the spirit gets grabbed and pretty much spit out to Deku's universe. While the spirit gets spit out, this is where she pretty much opens up her eyes and pretty much looks around and realizes that she's back human form. But she realizes she's also in bandages, and she starts to cover herself up. This is where she pretty much covers herself up with a umbrella thing, and pretty much, well, umbrella, those yellow jacket umbrellas, and begins to start looking around. As she looking around, she pretty much looks through like a mirror store, and sees that she's human again. And she begins to start speaking, saying, "I'm human again." Which this is where the entity pretty much starts threatening her, leaves a letter in the jacket and saying, you have this specific week to get this kid Deku and bring him back, or you're pretty much going to die, or you're pretty much going to be going back to the thing. It's right, you and him. Which the entity is basically threatening her and saying that if you sacrifice Deku, bring Deku back to this entity world, I will basically let you live your life normal and stuff. Which she pretty much reads a note and pretty much says, should I really do it? What if the entity's bluffing? Which pretty much she's too scared, and she pretty much just summons her blade, her katana, the shadow katana, which she can still do it. And she also realized that she can still use her ability, that she can phase through stuff. Well, goes into spirit mode and basically disappear from people's eye. Which she pretty much realized that she can use it more permanently, as she can do it and then turn it off and turn it back on without recharging it. So yeah. So this is where she used her spirit mode and begins to start trying to find Deku so she can live her life and pretty much get Deku. Now, why is the spirit is tasked to do this? Because Deku pretty much caused it to happen. And the entity is thinking if it can grab Deku and bring him back to the dimension, you could say, or to the place, or yeah, it can pretty much use Deku as a charge and whatever Deku has as a power, and pretty much grab all the survivors, and also potentially grab new killers and survivors, and pretty much have his get and pretty much live on even longer. So yeah. But after that, this is where pretty much Deku begins to start going to the entrance exam, and as he's going to the entrance exam, this is where he starts going in, and he's pretty much not late, but he's last to go in. Now, as he's going in, he pretty much looks around and he sees many people, and he also sees Bakugo. This is where Bakugo stares at Deku and says, "Deku," and pretty much knows that Deku been missing for a hot year. A hot 2 weeks, you could say. So everybody thought Deku was dead. Many of the kids was also saying that they're dead. Some kids was talking bad. Which Bakugo, he was more sad than mad. He was more mad because he realized that he wanted to become a hero to protect weak people. And Deku, although he didn't know if Deku had a quirk or not, he was going to become a hero to protect the weak and stuff, and become like All Might, you could say. And since Deku disappeared, they thought Deku was dead. So this is where Bakugo changed his whole personality a little bit more, and like he's still the same Bakugo, but he's the Bakugo that is like trained to be stronger and to make sure that none of this happened again, just like his friend Deku to disappear, because he thought it was his fault that Deku disappeared, and Deku just left. He thought Deku killed himself, or just that, or something worse. Which this is where Bakugo is looking at Deku, but this is where Deku gets snapped out of it by another student saying, "Hey, why are you just staring at someone so weirdly? Like you've seen a ghost," which Bakugo says, yeah, sorry. Which Deku pretty much uses the spirit ability and pretty much switch seats with someone else. Wow. This is where Bakugo turns back around and realizes that Deku's gone, saying, while Bakugo's saying, "Am I seeing things?" Which he says, "Yeah, probably I'm seeing things." And begins to just start focusing. Now, this is where Deku passed all the tests again. And I'm just going to say, Deku do get their strengths and stuff, so I'm just going to say he lift up like 50 tons. No, well, 100 tons because of the Oni power. So he's going to also get their strength and power and stuff and their speed. So yeah, this is where he lifts up 100 tons because of the Oni. And he pretty much is saying, amazing. Now, as that's happening, this is where Deku is pretty much doing the robot thing. And as that's happening, this is where the teacher explains that you got to destroy the robots, but if you destroy the big robots, you get a lot of points, which pretty much Deku understands. And also rescuing points, you get points for that too, which Deku says okay. And this is where the instructor says 3, 2, 1, go, and everybody start going. This is where Deku uses the Legion ability and starts using Frenzy and starts running incredibly fast than everybody else, which they all see Deku running in quite a speed, running faster than Edon, you could say. Which Edon's saying, "What? Someone faster than me? He doesn't even have an engine." Which this is where Edon's saying, okay, I won't let him outrun me. Which Edon's trying to catch up with Deku, but he ain't catching up with him because Deku can just keep using it and not lose stamina. Now, as Deku's running, he's pretty much slashing robots left and right, and Deku can double the damage. So this is where Deku is pretty much destroying robots left and right, stabbing them, and he continues going. And as he's stabbing him, he's pretty much wiping the oil off his blade and pretty much doing it like wiping it with his sleeve because he doesn't want the oil to pretty much connect as he's slashing the robots and make a spark to explode on like one of the robots. So he's pretty much wiping his sleeve and slashing left and right. As that's happening, this is where pretty much everybody sees Deku just like running and slashing robots, and this is where the instructors are impressed, including All Might. He's looking and he's saying, this kid has potential. Which this is where he is thinking about making Deku a candidate for the One for All quirk because he haven't really found a successor. So yeah, keep in mind. So as that's happening, Deku is pretty much slashing robots left and right with a blade. Because I'm gonna say Deku has the ability to summon weapons. As he was walking past someone, he pretty much grabbed a quirk. So yeah, as that's happening, he pretty much is also switching his thing. Well, as he's slashing robots, he thinks he's done. Which this is where he hears a girl scream, and this is, of course, Uraraka screaming for help. Which this is where Deku gets serious and he begins to use. This is where he uses the hillbilly ability. The hillbilly ability, and he creates a chainsaw and starts running with quick speed at the big giant mech robot. This is where he pretty much slashed down and pretty much sliced one of the mech robot's legs. As the mech robot's about to fall, Deku's not done yet. This is where he uses Leatherface ability and he starts slashing the chainsaw left and right, all crazy like, and he begins slicing the other mech robot leg, the giant robot leg. And the giant robot's about to fall until Deku begins to use the shock, use Docker ability shock burst, and he pretty much only uses it on the robot and pretty much touches the robot and uses shock burst on the robot, pretty much making the robot explode before he hits the ground. As that's happening, this is where Deku pretty much picks up Uraraka and begins to start um running away using the Legion and running away from the robot before it blows up even bigger. As that's happening, this is where Deku gets Uraraka and lets her down, asking if she's alright. This is where Uraraka looks down and she's pretty much blushing and saying yeah and says thank you, which Deku pretty much goes away to go try to get some more points and runs off. This is where Uraraka pretty much looks up and asks, "Who's your name? What's your name?" Which pretty much Deku is already gone. This is where the exam is over and Deku is pretty much walking out, hopefully thinking if he passed or not, and pretty much just questioning if he passed or not, or was he strong enough to do it. But he pretty much just starts walking away and starts heading home. And as he's heading home, this is where a certain girl is looking at him. And she pretty much has her katana out and makes it disappear, saying, "So, he's here. I better follow him where he's going." Which, this is the spirit following him. Now, as Deku's pretty much going, he pretty much makes it home, which the spirit is using Spirit Tap, which she's using the scratch. Using the scratch marks. She can see scratch marks still, a little bit, only a tiny bit, and knows where Deku is pretty much at when she focuses on who's the main target. So this is where Deku makes it home, pretty much says, "Mom, he's home," which Inko glides that Deku home and asks if he passed, which he says he don't know. He thinks he passed, and he pretty much says he's going to go upstairs and pretty much rest, which she pretty much says, "Okay, make sure to come down to eat," and all that. Deku comes down to eat and pretty much goes back up in his room and goes to sleep. Going to sleep. As he's going to sleep, this is where the spirit is pretty much at Deku's house and in his room, pretty much has the blade and pretty much ready to stab Deku and grab him and take him to the entity. Well, take Deku at this specific spot and have the entity grab him so she can live her life back to normal. Now, as that's about to happen, this is where Deku pretty much is pretty much waking up and notice that there's a girl holding a katana ready to slice him down. This is where he pretty much dodges it, and she pretty much says, "Damn, I missed," and begins to start attacking Deku again. This is where Deku pretty much stops her and says, "Wait a minute," and pretty much creates a shield while she keeps attacking him and he's blocking. This is where she's pretty much explaining to him that she's the spirit that was trying to kill him one time, and she needs him to pretty much go back to that tunnel so she can live her life and be free. Which, this is what, while Deku is pretty much blocking, asks her what does she mean, and she begins to stop attacking and explains the whole ordeal and why she's doing this. As she's telling the whole ordeal, this is where Deku understands and pretty much says, "How come the entity just can't do it himself? And better yet, why just one person?" Which she's pretty much just thinking and saying she doesn't know, which this is where Deku explains to her that the entity is pretty much weak. So if he's trying to grab you, he can't grab you. You have to be in that tunnel to pretty much get grabbed by him. He can't do anything, which pretty much she understands and realized that she's actually free then. But this is where she realized that the other killers, and she begins to explain that some of the killers there do need to be staying there, but she explains to her, she basically explains to Deku that some of the killers actually is just some troublemakers, and some of them actually do deserve to be free, while some of them deserve to stay there, which she explains certain people. which Deku understands, and he pretty much is still talking to her about it. Now, this is where Inko is pretty much saying, "Honey, are you okay? I heard some noise," which Deku pretty much grabs the spirit and pretty much heads to the bed and pretty much says he's fine. This is where Inko asks, "Are you sure?" In which Deku's saying, "Yeah, he's perfectly fine. He just fell off his bed," which she says, "Oh, okay," and pretty much just closes back the door. This is where Deku is pretty much holding it, the spirit, and pretty much will have her close to his chest while she's pretty much blushing, and Deku saying, "Oh, sorry," which she's pretty much saying it's okay, but she says, but this is where she says she has nowhere to stay, and pretty much asks, "Can she stay here?" Which Deku pretty much says, "Yeah," and she pretty much stays for that night. No weird stuff. The next day, Deku pretty much wakes up and he pretty much gets a letter at the door saying that he's passed, and he pretty much reached first to passing All Might score, which Deku smiles and says, "Alright." And he pretty much heads back to his room and starts getting, pretty much heads back to his room and pretty much starts to relax. Now, this is part 1 of what if Deku was transported into the Dead by Daylight universe. If you like it, get this up to like 50 likes and I'll make a part 2. But I'm Kishan Chia. Thanks for watching and peace out.
It looks like you lost another one.